All right, guys, good evening, and welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study. Grateful that you're here, and if you're watching online, thank you for attending as well. And if this is helpful, then I'm glad for that. And if you may not be watching, you may not be in our area, I'm glad that you're hanging out with us. I know we have several folks that join in weekly or will watch it at some point. So thank you guys for joining in. I want this to be a good resource for you, especially if you're not local. But obviously, if you're not local, be connected to a local body under good, solid biblical teaching. That's what we want to point you to. So anyways, tonight, I thought this week, being that this is the Passion Week, where we are approaching Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, that we would look at, because somebody had mentioned this here one day, in the last couple of weeks, asking about arguments against the resurrection of Jesus. And this is an important question, and these are important arguments to address. Some of you may be familiar with some of these arguments. Some of you may say, I never heard of that. If you're not in like, and I say the Christian world, but like if you're not reading, looking online, what are people saying, who are people following, if that's something that you're not actively engaged in, then you're just going to be like, the resurrection is true, I don't know what else to say. I don't hear a lot of people giving me arguments going, I don't think it really happened. A lot of the issues that most of us face are people that go, I believe the resurrection, they're struggling with like a deep-rooted faith in Christ, rather than going, well, here's an argument that I've heard. But there is in the world, especially of the AI world now, ChatGPT, Wikipedia, there's so many articles out there that if you just kind of Google Jesus, if it's not a Christian site, you will often find, and I've seen this on YouTube videos, where somebody will talk about the resurrection as a historical fact, which we believe that, but then underneath, YouTube will post a Wikipedia article. They'll post it like not to the video, but it's in the description because they have the rights to do that. And so they will almost put a fact-checking article saying, this story is said by some to be true, but is mainly not believed by most of the world. Like they will just start inserting that too. Whereas if you ask, we did this with Alexa when she first came out. You'd ask her a question about Jesus, and I don't know if they've changed it because I haven't talked to her a whole lot about the gospel. She doesn't have a soul, so I don't feel like I need to just hammer her. But you would speak to Alexa and you ask her about Jesus, and I can remember that they would say the historical person of Jesus, and they would talk about the life of Jesus. But if you ask, did Jesus resurrect, or if you any question like that, no, that is believed to be a myth and a wives' tale, or whatever she would say. And there's hundreds of videos online of people doing this. So I don't know if they shifted that or she just doesn't talk anymore. But the point is that like the technology that's at our fingertips would love to reject the resurrection. Obviously, Satan has an agenda. The flesh has an agenda. And so if people can be dissuaded or moved away from the resurrection of Christ, which is, as you guys know, the very pinnacle in which everything in this book really climaxes on, and without that, then we should just kind of set this aside. As Paul said, if the dead aren't raised, if the resurrection is not true, then we, out of every single person on the planet, are most to be pitied. Like we should just, like you should feel super sad for us because we're believing in something that literally is not true. And all of this is just made up. But if the resurrection is true, and it is, which we believe that 1,000%, and we will talk about the joy and hope of the resurrection this Sunday, on Easter Sunday, then it changes everything about who we are. Now, I'm sure that you can have people, I could bring somebody in here from outside, and we could sit up here and they could say the resurrection did not happen at all, and I can say the resurrection absolutely did happen, and then we can have a debate and go back and forth. But these arguments are probably, at least they've been for a while, but they still are probably the three most used arguments within the secular world to rebuke and rebut the resurrection of Christ. So what we'll do is we'll just go through all three of them, and I'll explain them. And then we'll talk about some text as we go through them. And then I'll give you at the very end, if we have some time, I'll just give you some things that would be really, really helpful evidences of the resurrection of Christ. And so I did not add them to the back of the board, but I thought that may be helpful to do that. Of course, here's the deal. We know that we don't have an empty faith, but our faith is rooted on the person and work of Jesus Christ, that it is rooted on the authors in this book, which ultimately, who is the author of this book? God is the author of this book, and so we have the exact Word of God. We have 66 books, 40-plus authors, 1,500 years of this all being compiled, and the woven connectedness is unlike any historical document that has ever been written over that amount of time. So we know it to be true, and we also know this, like the old hymn goes, ask me how I know he lives, because he lives in me. So there are men that I know and women that I know that I'm going, if the gospel is not true, there is no way this person's life goes from lost to found. Like there's no way this person is born again outside of the gospel, outside of the good news of Jesus. So anyways, as I say all that, we'll talk, and then afterwards, if you guys have questions or comments, or maybe some other arguments you've heard, we can address those. So the first argument is the swoon theory. The second argument we'll talk about is the hallucination theory. And the third one is we'll talk about, which has probably become the most prevalent argument that has been used in the last 15 years, is the stolen body theory. So the swoon theory, the hallucination theory, and the stolen body theory. So let's talk about the swoon theory first. Some of you may not even know, what is the swoon theory? So very just kind of briefly defined, the swoon theory is the belief that Jesus did not die on the cross, that he was swooned, if you will, or unconscious, so much so that maybe the heartbeat was unable to be detected, and he was just at the point of death, and so they pull him off of the cross, they wrap his body up, it's given to Joseph of Arimathea, it's laid in a tomb, the stone is rolled over that, and 3 days later, man, he just gets up and walks it off. That's kind of, and you can kind of just see the ridiculousness of that argument. But there are a lot of scholars that would kind of go, well, maybe he didn't die. And there were very, 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 very few cases within Roman execution, and none of which I could find in regards to crucifixion, where the Roman soldiers would have just been like, hey, this guy's not dead. This was their job, and they made for sure that he was dead. If the prisoner or the person on the cross did not die, and somehow that happened, the Roman soldier lost their life for that. So it was not like, oh, this is no big deal. It's okay, Bob. Like, I get it. We all make mistakes. You know, you were in training. The other soldiers should have just handled the business. So according to this was that ultimately in the tomb, Jesus is resuscitated somehow, and he's able to just somehow get out, move the stone, gets past the guards, and just kind of hobbles off to the disciples and goes, hey, see? Can't you tell? I'm resurrected with all of the scars on my back and all of the nails in my hands and the spear in my side. Yeah, I hobbled over here just to let you guys know you can go forth, and now you can go and die for this truth. That's not really a truth because I didn't really resurrect, but I just fooled everybody. So anyways, that is, so the appearances of Christ after, and according to this theory, just everybody said no, these are things that we do not believe, we're just telling you what they say. According to this, after he appears to them, it was a supposed resurrection. That's why they would say, well, yeah, y'all thought he resurrected because he was, beat to tar and just scarred, and he was able to see you, and so therefore he was able to dupe and fool all of the disciples. So let's talk about, just for a second, the argument is kind of crazy. But let's talk about the Roman soldiers. So you had two groups of Roman soldiers that really were involved in both the beating, the flogging, and the crucifixion of Jesus, as well as the soldiers who would be appointed to guard the tomb of Jesus. So there was two sets of Roman soldiers. And really, as I looked at this and kind of studied it, the crucifixion soldiers, y'all, that's kind of what they did. Like they were almost like I guess in my mind, almost like the SS squads for like the Nazis. Like it's just what they did. Like they weren't necessarily in hand-to-hand combat, although they could have been, but they were recruited, and it took a special, I say special, quite the devoted, probably a screw loose or two soldier to go, I want to volunteer, or I'm being asked to be on the crucifixion squad, because everything with crucifixions, for the most part, y'all, it was a public spectacle. Like it was meant to be intimidating to all that looked at it and walked by. And, you know, we have executions in our country, whether it's the electric chair. I know the firing squad, I think, got brought back for something at some point. There's a poison is injected. I guess lethal injections in Georgia, that's what they do here if you get the death penalty. But, like, y'all, that is not for public display. And golly, if it was, maybe crime would dramatically drop if people watch that. But the Roman government was like, if we crucify you, we're making a statement with the crucifixion. Think about the thief beside Jesus. Like these men that had done these things, thieves and murderers, like they're being put on display to go, if you do the crime, you're crucified. Like it's not just we just stick you in jail for some of these things, but if it's a heinous enough crime, we kill you publicly in front of everybody, and your body is left up there dead hanging so that people can walk by and go and tell their kids, hey, you see that? That's a really good deterrent, right? Right? It's not like, hey, look, TV will get taken away. You're not going to get a snack tonight, or you're not going to Six Flags this weekend. It's like, you see Bob up there? Don't be like Bob. So crucifixion was a huge deal. And the point of it is to not mess this up. They're not just pulling bodies down where the guy's like, man, you guys could have just finished me off. No, like when they go up there, they do not, the Roman soldiers don't release that body until they are 100% sure that the person on the cross was dead. So these guys are in charge of this capital punishment crew, that this is kind of all they do. And so they don't leave until their job is complete, and there is evidence historically where Roman soldiers would be executed themselves. Some of them crucified themselves if they let a body down and give him back to the family or to whoever, or put in a tomb and it was not dead. So I can't find any error that they made with that, but I'm sure at one point when it first started, it was like, oh, yeah, you guys don't finish the job, then you die as well. So they would have been completely satisfied that Jesus was dead, as well as the other men on the cross, and any other man on the cross, when they did their job. So let's look at a few of these as far as the crucifixion goes. If you've ever done any look at crucifixion, because we're going to talk about flogging, which is what happens to Jesus prior to the crucifixion. But if you've ever done any research on that, and I know kind of every year that kind of gets brought up about this time, where we kind of specifically talk about this. But in John 19, we'll just stick in John's gospel. Other gospels have accounts, but we'll just stick in John's gospel. John 19, 1 through 3 says this. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. So flogging, now this is the thing too. You almost have to do a little bit of work in our culture to kind of understand this. Any first century reader of the Gospels would have understood immediately if it said that somebody got flogged or somebody was crucified. For us, like you can just tell that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are writing to a specific audience who already have some details. They already know that. Does that make sense? Like if somebody writes a letter to us today and they mentioned COVID or the pandemic, if they just said that and kind of made comments about it in the letter, we would all be like, yep, 100%, right? if you wrote that same letter and somebody's reading it, I don't know, 100 years down the road from us, you would have to have some understanding of what the pandemic was, what the 2020 pandemic was, right? You'd have to know that. Like, you wouldn't just know that because it's not something that you experience. So when they said that Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, meaning the soldiers, he handed them over to the soldiers, and they flogged him. So flogging was a brutal, brutal beating, and the goal was to bring that person to pretty close to death in pain and agony, and then hand them over to the crucifixion soldiers so that they could put him on the cross. So the flogging soldiers, their job, which they were still in this kind of crucifixion crew, the first set of soldiers, their job was to inflict massive amounts of pain without actually killing the accused, the criminal. That was the whole goal of that. So flogging, there was a thing that you may have heard this, a cat of nine tails. And so it was like a leather, whip, stick, and the leather whip would be on the thing, and it would have, the nine tails comes from, there's 9 straps, and they would tie pieces of bone, pieces of metal or wood to it. Laurie may be pulling up a picture of it right now. Oh, I don't know if you pull it, but anyways. But like, you can watch that, and they would cut the pieces of bone and metal in such a way that when they hit, it would stick in almost like prongs, and then they would rip the flesh out. So typically, just like Paul received 40 lashes minus 1, 39. They wouldn't give Jews 40 lashes, but 39 lashes. So Jesus very well may have received 39 lashes with a cat of 9 tails or some other device that just would have ripped his body to bits. And so they had him kind of leaning over possibly like a barricade, and they may have even cuffed his arms so that they could just whip and abuse him. A lot of times this was done naked. You know, even the Passion of the Christ, which is a really brutal depiction of the crucifixion and flogging of Jesus. Even in that movie, I remember who did the movie? Mel Gibson, who directed it. He even said, you know, crucifixion historically was done naked. They would have been naked. So you always see Christ on the cross. You always see, even our little picture on the window right here, there's always a loincloth there. But y'all, Roman crucifixion was, they were flogged naked, they were stripped naked completely, and they were hung on a cross naked. Like, that is the shame. That is the shame. That is for everybody to know. Like, there's nothing more vulnerable than being naked, crucified, pinned to a tree. Like, that was their goal was intimidation. Their goal was power, to instill fear in people. And so Jesus is flogged. And then with Jesus, it was a little different. They twisted together a crown of thorns because he had claimed to be the King of the Jews. Oh, okay, King, here's a crown for you. So not only is he flogged, he's got a crown put on, and they throw this purple robe on him while all this is taking place. And then it says, and they're striking him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and they're striking him with their hands. Like, this was extra. Like, this guy is claiming to be the Son of God. This cannot go unpunished. This has to go like with the most punishment. So then John 19, 16 through 18, it says this. So he delivered him, this is Pilate, over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and he went out bearing his own cross. So he carries, now you guys have obviously seen like the traditional cross that looks like that. You can see it on the thing. Even back here we have them. So Roman crucifixes were typically not like cross, but more like a T-shaped. So what he actually carried in movies, we just know more from history now. Movies often depicted him kind of just carrying the whole cross with him. There was no way he could have carried that. Like, it would have been too large. There was no way he could have done that. So he's carrying, in essence, the cross beam of the cross is what he's carrying, as far as he can go. And then, obviously, we have in other gospel accounts where a crowd member is pulled because he couldn't even carry it to Golgotha. Couldn't even carry it all the way. But John's gospel tells us that he went out bearing his own cross to the place called the place of the skull, which is, in Aramaic, is called Golgotha. There they crucified him with 2 others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. So we have the flogging in our first section. After that, crown of thorns put on, robe put on. He's mocked. He's punched by the soldier's fist, Pilate then hands him over to the specific crucifixion soldiers. He bears the crossbeam as he walks toward Golgotha, where he will be crucified in Jerusalem. And then there, verse 18, it says, there they crucified him, him with two others, one on either side, and Jesus in between. And so, crucifixion, there again, all we get is just kind of, and they crucified him, right? We don't, there's no real detail as far as like how crucifixion went down. So when they crucified Jesus, they would have run nails, and for all intents and purposes, like this was the hand, but also the wrist was the hand. So and we've just learned this as we have, we always think of the nails in the hands of Jesus. Well, he would have ripped, because of his body weight, he would have ripped through his hands. So if you look right here, if you ever seen an x-ray or look up an image of a forearm, there is a bone splits right here. What is it called? Do you know? Yes. And so there is a gap right here that can go out the other side because the bone splits. That's where the nails would have been driven in both hands. So just consider all of this that he's been through, and then there would have been a prop for his feet, and then they would have shot a nail through his feet so that he could have pushed up. Because when you're hanging like that, a lot of the guys that were crucified died of asphyxiation just because they would literally suffocate. So you could push yourself up if you had enough strength to get air. So flogged, crown of thorns, physically beat, bearing his own cross, to Golgotha, crucified him. So they would have just put that board to a larger board and then stood that board up in the ground. And then John 19:34 says this, but one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. So I just consider even trying to kind of argue that Jesus didn't die from his wounds in the crucifixion is really, really pretty outlandish to make the claim. Does that make sense? Because it's not like they're like, well, there's hundreds of accounts where people are crucified by the Roman soldiers and then the person just gets up and like leaves or resuscitates days later. Not to mention he's in the tomb with nobody to help him. So even if you were even going to debate resuscitation, he would have needed a whole squad of people there trying to do that. But as we know, that is not the case. So flogged, crown of thorns, physically beat, mocked, crucified, and then the soldier, for good measure, runs a spear through the side of Jesus. Out comes water and out comes blood. So, anyways, as we see that, and then we get to the tomb soldiers. Let's read this in Matthew's Gospel 27 through 57 through 66 says this. And when it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. I mean, this is a devoted guy who says, listen, the guy who we saw do miracles, perform all these things, he's dead, Pilate, obviously you know that. I think Joseph of Arimathea is not thinking at all that Jesus is resurrecting. He is thinking, I'd like to honor him. We all loved him. We'd like to honor him with this tomb, and I have a tomb. He would have had access to that. I have a tomb, and I would like to do that. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him, and Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen shroud, and laid it in his own tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Now, this is obviously a group of people with Joseph of Arimathea that are doing this. He's not doing this all by himself. So there are multiple people that are either followers of Jesus. Now, the disciples, where have they gone? Them jokers have scattered, right? The ones that were with Jesus all the time, people were going, hey, weren't you with Jesus? And what does Peter say? Nope, he denies him 3 times. Everybody's gone other than John, who is there with Jesus' mother. And we will talk about what he said to his mother and to John Friday night at our Good Friday service. And so, and he rolled the stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there sitting opposite the tomb. And so they see this. Everybody sees Jesus go in there. His body has been wrapped in this linen, put in this tomb. The stone has been rolled, and they just sit there. This is it, right? We thought, man, he said all these things, but it looks like this is absolutely done. Verse 62 says, it's the next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember how that impostor, referencing to Jesus, that impostor said while he was still alive, after 3 days, I will rise. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, you have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. So, y'all, and nobody is thinking he's actually going to resurrect. The thought was what? The disciples, they loved this guy so much. Apparently, most of them, but only one of them was there. They loved him so much. Set some guards in front of this tomb just so that they don't come and roll the thing away and steal the body and then go, yes, he's risen. But their concern was not that he would actually rise. Their concern is that somebody would come and take the body of Jesus. So the purpose of the swoon theory is not to dispute his death, is not to dispute his death, but rather to seek to disprove his resurrection. But they're not saying that he didn't die at some point. They're just saying at the point that he's crucified, maybe the reason why the disciples claimed that he'd resurrected was because he really didn't die in the first place at the crucifixion. And so, if Jesus doesn't resurrect, and this is just clear for us today, if Jesus doesn't resurrect, then he's not God. Then he's not God, and as Paul says, we're most of all to be pitied, and we should just go on about our way. So the swoon theory. Now that has not gained as much traction. That was kind of like, man, just historically, writers such as Josephus will claim very clearly that Roman soldiers did not mess this up. So this is not just a gospel writer, like Bible writer saying this. Other secular historians at the time of Jesus and the time of the gospel writers would go, yeah, he died. It was clearly noted that he died. It was documented as historical record, and that he was placed in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. So that was really clear. It wasn't like it was like, man, I don't know. Like I thought I saw him moving when they picked him up. Like everybody was clear that he was dead. But there again, this is just another attack from the enemy to go, oh, he probably was unconscious, and therefore no big deal. So that is an argument that has been made. Is not a very good argument. So the second one is this, the hallucination theory. And this is probably, at least in my mind, I say one of the more silly ones, but the hallucination theory states that because Jesus had, in essence, kind of brainwashed the disciples so intensely that he was God, that he would raise from the dead, that the Father had sent him, that there was a mission to be accomplished, that all of these things were so just fed to them, and they just kind of got so brainwashed with this, is that they literally hallucinated saying, we saw the risen Christ. And they just made a ton of claims saying that he had risen, but really he had not actually risen. And so proponents of this view, I'm going to read this little section. Proponents of this view claim that Jesus' disciples were merely, really did see Jesus, but that these seeings or sightings of Jesus were merely hallucinations in the minds of Christ's followers, not genuine encounters with a resurrected bodily man who would ultimately eat with them, that would let them touch him, that he would actually hug them. So the hallucinations or sightings have claimed to have happened repeatedly and are said to have been so vivid as to convince Christ's followers that Jesus actually had risen from the dead. Even so much were they convinced, all of these people that were hallucinating, so much were they convinced that they would actually like lay their life down for this sighting, hallucination. So, um, I guess, and this is a guy that was writing this, he said the advantage of this proposal, this argument, is twofold. First, the proponents of this theory need not engage in the impressive evidence for the life-changing transformation of the disciples based on their newfound belief in Christ's resurrection. Rather, they could say that because of the so-called appearances and the miracles that he had supposedly performed, that they were just wrapped up in an ecstatic state, which is why you saw a transformation of the disciples being bold to go and preach the gospel. Like, almost like, well, they were just so emphatic about it, right? I mean, crazy people can be passionate, am I right? So all of those things that they would go in and say that. And then also, too, it was kind of like, well, one of the reasons why this is plausible, one scholar said, he said, is because they were anticipating seeing something. Does that make sense? Like there was an anticipation of them seeing Jesus resurrected because he said, I'm going to resurrect. So it would almost be like somebody saying, hey, look, like tonight, like in this dark room or whatever, like I've heard that this little thing comes out when it gets really dark in this room. Well, in your mind, he's saying if you really believe what you were being told, then maybe if you were in a dark room, you would go, I saw it. Did you see it? Right? You know how like just your mind starts to play tricks on you. So he's saying that all of these people, at all of these times, and this is multiple occurrences, that there is a claiming. We have roughly 11 situations in the Gospels and Acts where Jesus appears to a person or persons. So then the hallucinations have to happen in every single setting with every single group, which just seems like crazy to me. So the gospel writers, I want you to listen to this, Matthew 28, 16 through 17. I just want you to listen to this because in the writing of the gospels, they are obviously what? Extremely pro-Jesus. Like extremely. So I want you to listen to what in Matthew's gospel is written. Matthew 28, you guys know this section probably well. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, it's 11 because Judas is no longer with us, he has killed himself, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. This is after the resurrection. It says, and when they saw him, they worshiped him. But what? But some doubted. Meaning like there were some that were like, man, I don't know about this. So you talk about, oh, they're all just anticipating this. I don't think any of them are really anticipating this. Joseph of Arimathea or any of the disciples, period. I mean, do you think if Judas actually thought that he was going to resurrect, that he would have just taken his life? He wasn't, this guy's dead, man, and I sold him off for, 30 pieces of silver. Like, there's no thought in their head that this is actually going to happen. I mean, heck, the only people in the whole gospel stories that know he's going to resurrect is Satan and the demons. They for sure know that this is going to happen. So when you look at this, even the gospel writers are going from a historical account. Yeah, they worshipped him. Some that were there, but then there was others that was like, I don't know about this guy. Is this really him? Like they're trying to make sure and verify this is him. We also have Thomas. Thomas is hugely doubting it. He goes, listen, I ain't believing nothing till I put my finger where his holes are. I'm not believing a thing. It's like, well, you were with him for 3 years, listened to him teach. You were willing to follow him then, but not now. So there was, I mean, not only is this like some spooky ghost chase they're talking about, like the idea that all of them were anticipating it, it's not like everybody's on LSD just going, I really hope that the alien mother god shows up with her spaceship. Like these are massive groups of people. And so, but the problem is this, is that hallucinations, when you have hallucinations, which hallucinations are a real thing. People can have hallucinations from mental health issues all the way to taking certain types of medicines to taking some sort of extracurricular activity drug, and you can have those. Now, I've been around people, the State Patrol, that were having hallucinations. Like this is not like a far-fetched thing. People do have them. But I want you to listen to two psychologists, Gary A. Sibcy, S-I-B-C-Y, and Gary Collins. Listen to what Dr. Sibcy says. He says, I have surveyed the professional literature peer-reviewed journal articles and books written by psychologists and psychiatrists and other relevant healthcare professionals during the past 2 decades and have yet to find a single documented case of a group of people who all had the same hallucination. It doesn't happen. It's not a happen. Hallucinations, that is an event for which more than one person purportedly shared in a visual or other sensory perception where there was clearly no external referent. So he's saying there is not a single recorded thing that we have on file where a massive group of people all have the same hallucination and claim the same thing and are just as certain about it as the person beside them. Like, that's just not a case. If all of us in this building go outside and we see something happen and every one of us goes, did you see that? Yes, I saw that. Here's the account. Everybody's story is aligning up the same. Then it would clearly be, it would be so outside of the bounds of reality to go, you must have just all hallucinated when you saw that, right? You must have all just had hallucination. Psychologist Gary Collins was no less clear when he remarked this: hallucinations are individual occurrences. By their very nature, only one person can see a given hallucination at a single time. They certainly aren't something which can be seen by a group of people. Neither is it possible that one person could somehow induce a hallucination in somebody else. Since hallucination exists only in the subjective personal sense, it is obvious that others cannot witness it. And I was even reading some of the folks that do study on drugs, hallucinations with some of the new drugs. They even said, one article even said, if you had 40 men at the exact same height and body weight, and all of them were taking the exact same amount of the exact same drug, whether it be mushrooms or LSD, whatever it may be, acid, if you're taking those things and then you told them like describe your hallucination, none of them would be the same. So the point of the hallucination in some massive group makes no sense, like, at all. Not to mention, most people like especially after they come off of that hallucination, if they were on any type of substance, would be able to even say, oh my gosh, like I was tripping out when that happened. So, Jesus, and these are several cases where Jesus appears not just to one person, but multiple people in the Gospels. Y'all, Luke 24, Matthew 28, John 20, Acts 1. All of these cases is where he is appearing to groups of people where everybody is seeing the same thing physically. So, 1 Corinthians 15, and this is probably one of the best places in the New Testament that kind of talk about Jesus' appearance, not just to one person or two people, but to 500 plus brothers at one time. Listen to this. 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8 says this: For I delivered to you, Paul says this, to you as of first importance that I also received that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the what? Scripture. So ultimately, all of this goes back to what? The Bible declares that the Messiah would come, the Messiah would die, and he would resurrect. Like, that is just clear throughout all of the Old Testament. That he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance what? With the Scriptures. So at the end of the day, this stuff has already been determined, it's already been decided, and it's already been laid out. And he appeared to Cephas, Peter, then to the 12, then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep, meaning when Paul wrote the letter, some of those guys that he appeared to have already died and gone to glory. Then he appeared to James, that was his brother, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. And he appeared to Paul after he had resurrected. He showed himself to him on the road to Damascus when he spoke to him directly. Very unique, descriptive experience that Paul has alone in the New Testament. So Paul's saying, listen, here's the accounts. He's appearing to all the disciples. He appears to them. He appeared to Peter. He appears to James alone. And then he appears to 500 brothers, more than 500 brothers, at a single occurrence. So there will not be, listen, there's no hallucination happening when everybody's going, we have seen him. We have seen him. He's risen indeed. Like, we have seen him. So, also too, like, just, if the hallucination theory is even remotely, like, with any truth, then what happened to the soldiers at the tomb that were placed there to guard the body? Even secular historians write that like his tomb would have been guarded. Like, so this is not like, so did the guards just, like, did they not just go, hey, we could just show you the body. Why don't they just show them the body? That would be the most clear thing is go, look, here's his body. Look, these guys are lying because these guys absolutely created a revolution after this happens. And most of them will die willingly and faithfully for this false truth or this hallucination. That was why would all of these men go and die for this? So the hallucination theory does not hold much weight at all. But it is an argument that will get thrown out there, which I think that with anybody with any kind of just ability to research or study of history or just a little bit of common sense would just kind of debunk both the swoon theory and the hallucination theory. Now, the stolen body theory is the third one, and this one has probably had the most traction as far as just maybe people just questioning the resurrection of Jesus, because with the stolen body theory, they're saying, well, if he wasn't swooned and came back and resuscitated, and there wasn't an hallucination because then you could find the body, well, if the body was stolen, then it has been buried somewhere that you will never find it and we will never know where it's at, so there will be no recovery. So you could claim that he resurrected and you could claim that he ascended to the right hand of the Father. You can claim all that, but there's no body, right? And so they're saying, yeah, we agree there's no body because why? It was taken. And so there have been several guys, John Dominic Crossan. This guy, have you ever heard of the Jesus Seminar? I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. If you Google that, just know that this group with the Jesus Seminar is out to debunk or to prove that the resurrection is not true. So let me just read this excerpt I put in here. The co-founder of the Jesus Seminar, John Dominic Crossan, has asserted that since Jesus was crucified, his body would have either been left on the cross to be torn apart by wild beasts or buried in some shallow grave and possibly devoured by dogs. Like, that's his explanation. No, you can't trust the gospel writers, even though we have secular writings with people who aren't Christians to attest to that he was given to Joseph of Arimathea to be taken away. That's not just a biblical historical fact. Regarding Christ's body, Crossan wrote this: by Easter, Sunday morning, those who cared did not know where it was, and those who knew did not care. Why should even the soldiers themselves remember the death and the disposal of a nobody? So, Mr. Crossan, if you're listening or if you catch this, I don't even know if you're alive still, but if you are, I call you to repent. There is time. The Lord is patient, even though you have blasphemed the most significant event in all of human history. There was an anti-Christian document that was called the Toledath Jesu, and it was proposed that Jesus was initially buried in Joseph's tomb. Like, okay, we initially was buried in Joseph's tomb, but when a gardener named Judah heard about the disciples' plan to steal the body of Jesus, he removed the body from the tomb and buried it in another grave, and he informed the Jewish leaders and sold the body to them for 30 pieces of silver, and Christ's body was then dragged through the streets of Jerusalem. So there are like these little stories that have like popped up in the first century to kind of like, what they're trying to do is go, we have no body. These disciples have claimed that he is resurrected. There's a huge uproar. We have these jokers right now at Pentecost. They're speaking in other languages, sharing the gospel with all these people who have gathered. People are getting baptized. We need to end this quickly, or we're going to have like the entire Roman region taken over by these Christians. So like they're just coming up with ways to like, almost like, y'all, and it's no different than now. If you ever just watched, and I won't mention the news channels that do this, but if you ever notice how the news channels, like, they're just always like spitting out propaganda to like create doubt in your head. Like it could literally, like I almost never trust the initial report on any shooting, anything to do with any type of ethnic or racial, anything. You're just like, look, I'll watch it in the next 2 weeks. Because everything in the beginning is almost like, It's like they are just biting to get your attention and get you swayed immediately without us really knowing any of the facts, right? I mean, if something happens in California and we're hearing about it, who's reporting on it? The news. Who has what? All of the information, and they can divide it up and then feed it to you how they'd like you to be swayed one way or the other. News overseas, y'all. I mean, I don't know if y'all, North Korea, China, y'all, they have state-run television. So they're literally telling the people there, they have no clue how we operate here. They're telling their people there, this is how they operate. This is what happened. Like they do revisionist history all the time. I was reading a thing where they were talking about how they would have like cartoons, like comics, like North Korea has comic books of American soldiers like attacking and killing like North Korean like families. Like they read this stuff thinking that this beast across the sea just does this. So if you get to people first and you tell them a lie, people tend to lean toward what they hear first. So if you can get to everybody and tell them a lie, you can change their stuff. When I was a trooper, part of our training was accident reconstruction and accident investigation, which is a pretty big bulk of what the State Patrol does is accident stuff. And so they would tell us this. We had a couple of psychologists and psychiatrists come in, and they would talk to us just how the mind works. And they said, if you're on scene, right, you're on scene, and you see a wreck, and you're already kind of in your mind, thinking, okay, well, how did this happen? Because when I would come to a wreck, I mean, if you just come to a wreck, you may be thinking, oh my gosh, the car's torn up and the flipped over and all those details. Well, in my mind, I'm obviously thinking about that, but typically the EMS is there handling the stuff. I'm looking at it as a puzzle. Where are the tracks on the road? How are the tires spinning? Which way did the vehicle rotate? Was it clockwise? Was it counterclockwise? Just based on the roadway evidence, if the cars got lifted up by the tracks in the rotation of the vehicle on the road, where the skid marks are, was there a tree hit? Did the car hit a tree and then shoot back out and hit another vehicle? I'm looking at all those things because what I want to do is come up with an assessment before I talk to the witnesses. Because all I'm doing is looking at the evidence. But what would happen is you'd get pretty anxious as a new trooper and you'd walk up to somebody and go, well, what happened? Well, typically, the first story that you're told, especially if it's remotely convincing, is typically, psychologically, the first one that you'll believe. Does that make sense? And so as a parent, you get good at this because if a kid comes in just crying, what happened? Tell me if you guys have ever done this. The first kid runs in just crying and just weeping. You're like, what happened? She just hit me for no reason. And so if you ever just found yourself like yelling the other kid's name without really hearing fully what happened, and then Parker would do that. And then Kate comes in and she goes, before you get mad, let me just tell you what she did. And then she would explain that, she'll explain it to me, and I go, okay, Parker, did you do that? Yes, I did. And then she just confesses. But the point is like, a lot of times the first person to get to you, especially if it feels convincing, you're almost kind of like, I'm siding with that person. It's almost like now the second person has to convince you that what the first person said is untrue. Now, sometimes the stories would align with a wreck, but sometimes it would be like, no. And then 4 people would go, liar, she's a liar, that is not what happened. And then so now you have all these witnesses who aren't even connected to the story saying, that's not what she did. I know she's saying that, but she got out of the car saying that. By the way, look what we found, and they're kicking a bottle of Jack Daniels down the road because it fell out of her car. So you immediately have discredited yourself anyways. So the point of this is that these things are being brought up, and this guy right here, y'all, if you look up the Jesus Seminar, like there's a lot of people that follow this person. And a lot of it, I think, is just Satan's way of being divisive. Creating doubt, just doubt, just a little bit. He's a nobody. He died for nothing. These people in the church, they're excited. They love the Lord. Somebody raises their hands. They say their devotion is to Jesus. They are deluded. It is the opium of the masses. They've bought into a lie. Atheist Richard Carrier has promoted several alternatives to the resurrection, including the idea that the body of Jesus was stolen from the tomb. He hastens to add that his essay demonstrates the plausibility, but by no means is certain, of the hypothesis that Jesus' body was stolen. Carey does not really push for a specific culprit in such a theft, only wants to raise doubt in the mind of the reader. Maybe it was stolen. Maybe it's not true. And the reality of that is that we can trust the Scriptures as historical documents that have been verified, that we have no body, B-O-D-Y, we have no body of Jesus. We have no evidence that it was hidden. We have no evidence that somebody stole it. We have no evidence that dogs ate it. We have no evidence of any of those things. So Matthew chapter 27, 62 through 66 says this: "The next day, that is after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate." I'm going to read this again because we just read it. "And said, 'Sir, we remember how the impostor said while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise. Therefore order the tomb to be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people.'" Like, here's the deal. They were expecting somebody to steal the body. Like, this was the whole point. No one thought he would resurrect. They were anticipating the body being stolen, if not by the disciples, then by somebody else. So what do? Go secure the tomb, make sure the body's there, seal it, and just stand guard. That's how we will know. I mean, and these soldiers, if they don't do right, and if they get hurt and the body gets stolen by the disciples, man, their heads are going to roll. It says, "He is risen from the dead." This is what they will say. "He is risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first." So if they steal the body, this is even going to create more chaos than him even claiming to be the Son of God, which obviously it would. Pilate said to them, you have a guard of soldiers. Go make it secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. So they are there to make sure that this is not going to happen. So let's look at this right quick, and then we'll close up. Matthew 28, 1 through 15. This is the account of what happened, and this is also the account of the story, the stolen body theory, which has been the most prevalent story told throughout the Jews to this very day. If you ask a Jew, did Jesus die? They will say, yes, he was a historical person. He did die. Did he claim to be the Son of God? He did claim to be the Son of God, but he was not. And he did not resurrect. The body was taken. The followers of his took it. Those radicals took it. So this right here is really the debate. When I've asked Jewish people, well, did he resurrect? Well, no. Well, how come we can't find the body? Well, they took it. So listen to this. This is the story. This is Matthew's account. Matthew 28, 1 through 15 says this: "Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it." I guess they didn't secure it well enough for the angel. "His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men." Now, you notice they didn't come to the guards and go, "Fear not." Ain't no fear not, like they talked to Mary or Zechariah. "And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, 'Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified.'" I know you seek him, right? They're coming what? They're coming to prepare the body. They're going to, because they did not want to do it, because you obviously had crucified on Friday. Saturday was the Sabbath for the Jews, and so they needed to get him off of the cross before nightfall so that they could get him buried. They did not want that to go into the next day, because at that point there was going to be no work to be done, and so they needed to get him off the cross and buried. And so he is not here, for he is risen, and he said, "Come see the place where he lay." He said, "Listen, come on in and check this out. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you." So they departed quickly from the tomb with the fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to him, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." And while they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priest all that had taken place. They came up and told these men, you ain't going to believe this. We tried to secure it. We were standing guard, Well, did the disciples come? No, not exactly. There was some women that walked up. You could handle them, right? Well, we could probably handle them. Then this angel descended. It was an earthquake, and he rolled the tomb away, and we didn't know what to do. We were just frozen, dead, fear. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, because here's what happened. They didn't get overtaken. Literally something divine, miraculous happened. And they said, tell the people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. That's what you tell them. You tell them that while y'all were asleep, they came and they took the body. And if this comes to the governor's ear, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed, and this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. Now, obviously, the day he's talking about is not 2025. He's talking about the time in which he's writing this to his specific, to his specific audience. But it is remarkable that even Jews today, now I don't know if every Jew necessarily believes this, but most of the Jews that I've spoken to are like, the reason we can't find the body is because it was taken and either destroyed or hidden. Like, and that's why everybody believes the resurrection is such a big deal. But so that would be kind of their argument. Although, y'all, that's a lot of people that are willing to die for a lie. That's a lot of people willing to give their life up for the gospel. That's Paul giving up an entire lifestyle just for this, just to just say something random happened. But here's the thing: they could not snuff this out. They couldn't squash it because it wasn't squashable. It was literally like the fulfillment of the Scriptures. And so, anyways, just a wonderful, I mean, as elaborate as these theories become, most of them, even if you're reading this, you're like, they're just grasping at straws. They're just grasping at straws, and none of that can be validated. None of it is valid. There's no validity to this at all. And sadly, the Jews today are awaiting the coming Messiah. They're awaiting the first coming of the Messiah. And boy, will they be disappointed when he comes back for the second time, because it will not be like the first time. So, anyways, as we see this, if you guys hear some of these things, and you may not, you may just say, man, I didn't even really realize those were just arguments that people were being made. Some of those things are kind of on a scholarly level, but some of those things, if you run into people just that are maybe Jewish or in the Jewish community, they may say, well, the body was stolen, and then you could just say, well, where's the body? That's been the case since the very beginning of those things. 500 people saw him resurrected. Like, all these people claim this. I mean, every one of the disciples isn't saying, we believe that Jesus is a spiritual being somewhere. They're like, no, we saw his body raised. Thomas, in Luke 24, Thomas is putting his hands he's touching him. We'll talk a little bit about that, the verification of that on Sunday with the resurrection. But all of these things, I mean, lead us to go, the only plausible thing is, the only plausible, like, really affirming thing that could have happened based on all of the people who have testified and claimed this and died for this truth. 70 million martyrs since the resurrection of Christ, is that Jesus was the God-man, the second person of the Trinity, who was fully God and fully man, one person with two distinct natures, that he came, that he died, that he resurrected, and that for 40 days he appeared to the disciples. He taught them. He stayed with them. Y'all, he's eating fish. He's cooking breakfast for the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. And he eats an entire fish in the upper room with them, just to say, look at who I am. And they're all claiming this. By the way, just as another thing, and I'll close up with this. One of the crazy things, obviously, his non-biblical historical writers that were not claiming to be Christian, claiming that these people were experiencing these things, because it did not say that Jesus just walked through the streets of Jerusalem and just chatted with everybody. His appearances were very specific to the disciples. And he was like, listen, he even gets on to Thomas. Remember this, when Thomas is touching him? He says, listen, you see and you believe, that's great, but like, blessed is he who has not seen and believes. But enough of you are going to see this and verify this, that when you go out, there's going to be power poured out to you by the Holy Spirit, where the Word of God, you preaching this, is going to draw people unto salvation. So what a beautiful picture that is, that Jesus just doesn't announce himself on a billboard to everybody, but goes, these men will be faithful and they will take this message and they will go throughout the world. Because here's the thing, if God is not regenerating the heart of man and he's not saving people by the power of the Holy Spirit, even if people think they saw a resurrected Christ, it doesn't mean that they will believe and call him Lord. Even some of the folks on Matthew 28, they worshiped him, some worshiped, but some doubted. You know, Judas is one of those. He was walking with Jesus, talking with Jesus, doing all these things, and he still rejected that and took his own life. So, one thing I think that's really kind of neat, and then I'll close up with this, is that somebody said, well, what is kind of just a historical evidence of like the resurrection like being like a valid like proclamation outside of all the deaths of the disciples, outside of the fact that we've heard the gospel today, all those things. One of the largest things is that in all four gospels, who are the people at the tomb that verify, that account and report that the body's missing? Women. Like so women were less than respected, massively less than respected then. There is not really, women weren't even allowed to testify in court. Like if there were a witness to something, a woman, if there could be 20 women, it would not be counted against one man's word. So the fact that the gospel writers would even take into account that the ladies are the ones who are reporting to the disciples that he's risen, like if they were going to make the story up, it would have been much more valid to use Peter or James or John as the person that goes, oh, the tomb is empty. But they used the ladies as the first eyewitnesses of the resurrection to actually report that. And you would never, like in historical writing, women were never the ones with the credible word. So so if you were going to make a story up, you would have just said that some men saw it. Like if they were trying to pull a fast one on us, they would never have used ladies as the initial contact. And all four gospel writers use women as the verification. Meaning this, that if they're trying to dupe you, they're doing a really bad job. They did really good up until this point. They wouldn't have done that. So the only reason that you would put it as the women said it is because what? It happened. There would be no reason to use them otherwise. It would have made no sense. Plus, if you're writing it, you could just go, oh, I'll just put something else that Thomas saw them. I would just put something else. And you would not have the fact that people in his own group were doubting that it was true. It made no sense. If you're trying to pull a fast one, right? News agencies don't go, well, we're saying this, but there's really a lot of evidence contrary. Like they just spit the lie and they just kind of let the seed sit, which in this case didn't happen. So hopefully this was helpful, you guys, with the swoon theory, with the hallucination theory, with the stolen body theory. If you hear them, you could send them this video, or you could just say, hey, look, let's kind of just rationally, and that doesn't mean they become a believer because you explain it, but what it does is this, is it lets people know that your faith is not built on something like empty. Not just like, well, I just believe because my grandmama told me. Like, I believe because the Bible is historically accurate. It's been verified. There are more copies of the Old and New Testament than almost any other historical document. Thousands upon thousands of copies of the Old and the New Testament. And like, it is one of the most validated, proven books in all of history. And so we can trust it as God's Word and as an historical document for our faith. So anyways, thank you guys for hanging out tonight, and know that we love you. Thank you guys for watching online. If you don't have a church for Resurrection Sunday this Sunday, come hang out with us at 10 a.m. We'd love to have you, as well as this Friday night at 5 p.m. We're going to do our Good Friday service. And so hopefully you guys can attend and be at that. Or if you're not in our area, please be somewhere this Easter. And not just this Easter, but every other Sunday after that, if you're able to be there. And be plugged into a local body that is preaching the gospel faithfully, that is wielding God's word faithfully, and that loves you well. So thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight, and we will see you Friday night and then Sunday.